What's happening, Saints fans? Happy Monday. Hope y'all had a wonderful weekend. And in today's video, I got my final roster projection for the 53-man roster as the preseason is officially concluded. Now, tomorrow on August 27th is roster cutdown day, so be sure to subscribe for more news and Saints updates around your team because we're going to see some roster cuts starting to pile in, maybe even as early as tonight and all day tomorrow. 4 p.m. Central Time is the roster cut deadline. So we're going to give you guys a video as soon as the roster is finalized, and we're going to be giving you analysis all throughout the season. Be sure to subscribe and lock us in. Wasting no time, we're diving right into it with the quarterbacks. Derek Carr will be the starting quarterback, and I actually think Rattler could be QB2 and Jake Haener might be QB3. And what I will say about these numbers right here, don't overthink it. Don't dive into the numbers too much. It realistically is just a way for me to keep track of all 53 people because believe it or not, it's kind of hard to actually keep track of all of those if you don't have the numeric designations right there, but I actually put Rattler here at 2 over Haener for a reason because in my personal opinion, Spencer Rattler was more impressive than Jake Haener this preseason. And Haener had a better completion percentage, he had more yards, but he had 0 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, whereas Rattler had 2 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. And you know, I'm a firm believer that Haener could be the QB2, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Saints do go that route, but I thought Rattler was a more impressive quarterback in the gameplay. Now, obviously, at practices, things could have been a little bit different, but for me personally, I like Rattler over Haener, and I'm not saying I dislike Haener. I just think Rattler was more impressive. Now, here is my running back projection. I'm going to go with 3 running backs and a fullback. Alvin Kamara, Jamaal Williams, Jordan Mims. No Kendre Miller right here. And then I got the Saints keeping Adam Prentice. The Saints did move on from Xander Horvath just a couple of weeks ago, about a week and a half ago, and now he is with the Miami Dolphins. But Adam Prentice won the fullback battle. I do expect Taysom Hill to get some run there as well, and we'll get to him in a moment. But there is a new rule around the NFL. Why I didn't have Kendre Miller in my roster projection? It's because of this right here. Teams can actually place 2 players on the injured reserve list that are designated to return on cutdown day. So I could see New Orleans going that route with Kendre Miller because I don't think they're going to cut him early into his career when it's not even year 2. Like, we haven't even seen 2 full seasons. We haven't even seen 5 full games of Kendre Miller play with the black and gold. So I could see New Orleans wanting to opt to keep him around, but they're not going to waste time and let him take up a roster spot if he can't play. So Jordan Mims had the nod for me, but I also was extremely impressed with Jacob Kibodi in the preseason week 3 matchup against the Titans. He had 2 touchdowns. He was running like a tough SOB. He looked like Marshawn Lynch out there running through MFers' faces. So I could make an argument that Jacob Kibodi, the Louisiana native, the former Raging Cajun, could possibly make the roster over Jordan Mims. But I do think Mims did a lot to prove his worth, and I think that he also did a great job of showing how versatile he can be. So I want you to pick a running back 3 for me. Kendre Miller, Jordan Mims, or Jacob Kibodi. Now let's go to the wide receivers because I think that this is an interesting unit. With Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and A.T. Perry holding down the top 3 positions, I do have reservations a little bit in terms of Cedric Wilson, Equanimous St. Brown, and Bub Means. And for Means, just because we haven't seen a ton of him in the preseason. Equanimous St. Brown was on the receiving end of a beautiful, perfect pass from Spencer Rattler versus the Titans. And got to give credit to St. Brown as well. It was a damn good route, and he did a good job of putting his body in a place where the ball was undefendable to the defensive backs. Now, Cedric Wilson, there's been reports with him having really good leadership with the wide receiver group. And I know that there's a couple of names that you guys are going to be upset that aren't on the roster. I have Mason Tipton and Samson Nakua headed to the practice squad because Tipton, we just literally did not get to see anything from him in the preseason because he was dealing with some injuries. And Samson Nakua, I mean, dare I say he had almost the greatest play in preseason history with that 105-yard kick return at halftime from the back of the end zone on the field goal attempt by Tennessee. Samson Nakua, based on that alone, showed that he has enough, or puts in enough effort, and he has the heart, and he has the competitive willingness to do whatever it takes to help his team win and just to play football. So I think both of these two guys are headed to the practice squad. And with Tipton, he had a strong start to the offseason, but just haven't gotten to see much in the preseason. So at tight end, I got the Saints keeping 3 of them. And I know there's no Dallin Holker right here, but we're going to talk about it in a second. I do have them keeping Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, and Taysom Hill. And for Taysom Hill, he's not going to just be a tight end. I expect him to line up at running back, fullback, maybe even a little bit of quarterback. I could even see him returning kickoffs. Taysom Hill is the Swiss Army knife. He is not a tight end. He is a football player through and through. But for Dallin Holker, I think he is a player who could be headed to the practice squad as well. And I do fear that if he does go to the practice squad, he's a player that'll get poached by another team. And with Dallin Holker, he didn't get a ton of production in the preseason. And it's not like he had a ton of opportunities to get a lot of production. But with him, I just think it's going to be tough to create another roster spot. That means if they want to carry 4 tight ends, somewhere on the roster, that's one less spot at a different position. And for tight end, I just don't think Holker has done enough to challenge Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau to be tight end 1 or 2. So for me, I got practice squad for Dallin Holker. Now, I want to ask you this question. Where will he play? Will he make the roster? Yes or no? If you think he will make the final 53-man roster, type a yes. If you think he's going to be on the practice squad or he ends up getting cut or maybe even traded, type no. So let's get into the trenches because the offensive line, good God, this unit makes me upset. And it's because it's just underwhelming. Talise Fuanga, I'm excited to see what he can do in his rookie season. Lucas Patrick will be the starting left guard. Eric McCoy will be your starting center. I like what he's capable of. Cesar Ruiz, I'm hoping he can take some big steps and prove me wrong because I find him to be a frustrating player, not a bad player, but at times it's just too inconsistent for me. Trevor Penning, boy, he better put it all together. Landon Young is going to be a backup. I think Nick Saldiveri will be the backup left guard. He's also a player that possibly could get that second IR designation to return. Kyle Hergel, he has been really, really impressive so far. The rookie UDFA may have done enough this offseason to earn a roster spot. And on top of that, just because the Saints offensive line isn't full of high-end talent and they're not full of a quality depth, and they're pretty banged up. Maybe he can make the roster. And I have Oli Udoh rounding out the offensive line roster projection. New Orleans, why I went with 9, it's because last year they also had 9 offensive linemen on the roster in which they carried. So I want to add this context here too. Just because those 10 or 9 players that I showed you guys were my roster projection, I don't necessarily mean I don't necessarily think that is guaranteed to be the 53-man roster's offensive line group. I mean, John Hendricks reporting this yesterday that he's heard the Saints are looking to add an offensive tackle. So, with roster cutdowns coming on here in less than 24 hours, we're going to possibly see some more options available at the offensive tackle. And that's something I've been saying throughout this entire preseason where we've seen the struggles at the offensive line. Like, we're not going to go and grab a great name like a David Bakhtiari. Sure, it's an appealing name, I guess, a few years ago. But I've always been saying this, when roster cutdowns happen, teams are going to have to be getting rid of some of their offensive linemen. So maybe the Saints could be beneficiaries of picking up some scraps. Now, coming up, I got the defensive side of the ball and my projections for that, but I would not be able to get into it if it weren't for our friends over at Factor. They are back, ladies and gentlemen, and if you want to meet your wellness goals this fall, and if you want to save some time when you're trying to cook some quality meals, I highly encourage you check out Factor Meals. They have a delicious menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and keto-friendly diets. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. With 35 different meals and over 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore. Make every day delicious from breakfast to dessert. Stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. I'm a big, big fan of the honey maple barbecue ground beef. I'm also I got a massive soft spot for the loaded bacon, shredded chicken. I've been trying to eat a little bit more white meat, giggity. I'm also trying to be a little bit more healthy, shed some pounds. And, with the football season coming up here at Chat Sports, I find myself working a lot of long hours, and Factor has been able to keep me fueled and been able to keep me satisfied. So head over to factormeals.com/SaintsChat50 and use code SaintsChat50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. You hear that? 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month. Reminder, that's code SaintsChat50 at factormeals.com/SaintsChat50, and you'll get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. All of that information is in the comment section and description of this video. So I can tell you right now, I bet Chase Young, Cameron Jordan, I bet Carl Granderson, Brian Brzee. I know for a fact these guys are having Factor meals because they're always putting up great numbers and they're always looking great. So I got to just say, shout out to them for being Factor meals, enjoyers. Can't confirm, but I have reason to believe it. Cameron Jordan, I have him leading off our Saints defensive line roster projection, as well as Chase Young and Carl Granderson. I only got 3 defensive ends and 5 defensive tackles. Colin Saunders, Nathan Shepard, Brian Brzee, Christian Boyd, and Jack Heflin. Yep, I got the rookie defensive Heflin defensive tackle. You can see where I messed up there. But I got the rookie defensive tackle making the roster. And why only 3 defensive ends? Well, another option for the short-term IR list. Tano Passanio is dealing with an torn Achilles that happened at some point during the offseason. He was pretty productive last year. I don't think the Saints would want to cut him. I could see New Orleans wanting to keep him around, designate him to return. So maybe that's what happens with Tano Passanio. And then after that, Jack Heflin comes off the roster and you move in Tano Passanio. But what about Isaiah Foskey? Because the future around him is kind of confusing because I don't know if the Saints would cut him just outright, but maybe they look to trade him. Maybe they put him down on the practice squad. And again, I'm not necessarily sold that Isaiah Foskey will be more productive than a Jack Heflin. And again, it's different positions. It's defensive end versus tackle, and they have different roles, but it's just been a little underwhelming. And when I mean a little, I mean extremely underwhelming for Isaiah Foskey. I want to see him turn it up. He just never really did in the preseason. So Isaiah Foskey, I'm not necessarily sure what the future holds for him. I could see him making the roster. I could see him going to the practice squad, maybe even traded. I doubt he's cut, but who knows what's going to happen with him. So with the linebackers, this is an underrated group in my opinion. Demario Davis is one of the best linebackers in the National Football League. Pete Werner just got a really nice extension. Willie Gay, in my opinion, was a massive free agency steal. But Jalen Ford and Khaleke Hudson, they round out the top 5, and I actually made space for Anthony Orji because he's been impressive all throughout the preseason, and all the reports coming from the summer camps and training camps and all that fun stuff suggest that he has actually been one of the more productive players and one of the better stories, and he has grown a lot in year 2 coming out of Vanderbilt. I'm really excited to see how Anthony Orji can be utilized for the New Orleans Saints defensive rotation. And on top of that, I think he's a player who, when called upon, I'm not saying he's going to be a massively productive player because there is a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball, but I think he could be a reliable talent. And that right there is enough for me to give him a roster spot. But let's get to the cornerbacks. Marshawn Lattimore, Paulson Adebo, Alante Taylor, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Ugo Amadi, and then our sweet preseason prince, Rico Payton. I got 6 cornerbacks making the roster for New Orleans because I think that this is a really talented group. And to be quite honest, I could be convinced to throw 4 out of these 6 players out on the field as starters at any given time. But let's talk about Rico Payton because he was my preseason prince. And you can see the stats right here. You can see the stats right here. Spark notes, he was damn good this preseason. The rookie UDFA out of Pittsburgh State was a quality player. In preseason week 1, he was the second highest graded rookie across the National Football League in terms of his PFF grades. That's really, really impressive. He had a few opportunities where he made some good plays against the Niners. He had some really good plays against the Titans. I like Rico Payton a lot, and he did enough for me to carve out a spot, not just on the roster, but being a contributor on special teams, maybe even getting into the rotation on the defensive back group or in the cornerback group. I got to give a lot of credit to Dennis Allen and the New Orleans Saints. They do a damn good job of finding cornerbacks and, diamonds in the rough, if you will. I'm not saying he was a diamond in the rough, but, for a UDFA to make the 53-man roster as a rookie would be absolutely awesome for Rico Payton. I'm rooting for him. I'd love to see him make it. So let's dive into the safeties here, and then we got special teams. Tyrann Mathieu, Jordan Howden, Jonathan Abram, Will Harris, and J.T. Gray. I think J.T. Gray obviously will make the roster because he's your special teams ace. He's been a quality player. He's been a captain over the past few years. Tyrann Mathieu, one of the best safeties in the league. I'm excited for year 2 of Jordan Howden. Jonathan Abram, I think he can be a good contributor on the defensive side of the ball as well. Will Harris, maybe that's a player that doesn't make the safety depth chart because you want to add in an extra player at the offensive line, or you want to bring on another tight end and make space for Dallin Holker or something like that. So I could see Will Harris being the odd man out because JT Gray, in my opinion, is going to be your special teams captain. And for me, with players like the Saints have at the safety position, it's extremely upsetting that they did not go and get Justin Simmons. It's extremely upsetting that they were not able to make a splash move and add to the safety group this offseason outside of, some UDFAs. But I do believe that they have a quality group. I believe that the defensive back unit for New Orleans is one of the best in the league, and I think that they're going to do just fine this year. Maybe a player becomes available. Maybe another safety gets traded or somebody gets cut. That's a surprising move. Justin Simmons was a surprising cut. So who knows? Maybe somebody can get moved on from right before the season starts, and New Orleans could reap those benefits. So let's get to my special teams, special plays, special players. Check, 1, 2. Shout out Sketch. Blake Groupie. I got him winning the kicker battle. Matt Hayball. I have him unseating Lou Hedley and Zach Wood. He's been your long snapper for quite a while. I don't see that changing at any time either. So I want you to get down in the comment section. Grade the Saints roster. If it's a 1, you think they're terrible. If it's an 100, you think it's the best roster ever put together in the history of ever. Get down in the comment section. Share your thoughts. And y'all stay golden. We'll see you next time.